So there are several things that I think are interesting about the college football playoff national championship game, and we're going to discuss them after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today, I want to discuss at proper length, the implications of the college football playoff national championship game, the X's and O's, and what you should be looking for. First, I understand people have been looking forward to this, and I have had some stuff happen. Notably, we have a new portion of the set. But let's start talking about this thing. Look, Joe Burrow versus Trevor Lawrence is the headline, right? And I get that. But we're talking about over-unders for passing yardage that are ridiculous, all right? It's not just ridiculous that Trevor Lawrence's over-under for passing yardage against the LSU defense is 294.5. It's that Joe Burrow's over-under for passing yardage against the Clemson defense is 365 yards. What? Like, the total yardage might not be that for either one of those guys, right? But I also understand that there's been a lot of overreaction to LSU stomping a mud hole in my team, the Oklahoma Sooners. And I get it, right? I will just go out and say, defensively, LSU is in a different stratosphere than Oklahoma. And it doesn't really take rocket science to see that, all right? There are 3 first-round draft picks playing defensive back in a 4-person secondary for LSU, to say nothing of the Paycom Jim Thorpe Award winner Grant Delpit, who can play 3 different positions and is invaluable to LSU because of the scheme fit. I understand that many people don't even think he's the best defensive back on his own team, and I understand where you're coming from. But I also say that there's only one of those cats that can play 3 different positions. Christian Fulton has been outstanding. Derek Stingley Jr., for me, is the best true freshman in America, and Jacoby Stevens was a number 1 rated player in his class coming out of LSU. So you know what you got there. But it's also about what you're going to be able to get out of T. Higgins and what you're going to be able to get out of Justin Ross, because I think there's an advantage to be gained there. T. Higgins is a large human being, right? And yes, he got knocked out of the Ohio State game. He got knocked back in, right? I don't know what exactly they were looking at and what the concussion protocol was there, and I'll be interested to see what it looks like. But we're also talking about one of the longest layoffs between a playoff game and a championship when we're talking about the college football playoff. 16 days these guys have not played games. And I understand that football is a little bit different than other sports. It takes a little bit longer to recuperate, but we're talking about in the NFL, you got your wild card, your divisional, your conference championship, and then you take a little bit of a break. And I get that people want there to be a build-up to the national championship game, but what we find is not just because there are other college football games, particularly bowl games, that get an opportunity to be played out and to breathe and everybody gets to enjoy them, but you also have the early signing period that is taking place not just at the beginning of bowl season, but you also have what we know of as the transfer portal season, where guys are moving and shaking. We're talking about, for instance, right, Theo Howard announced that he's grad transferring to Oklahoma. That's going to have some people thinking about what Oklahoma could be, what UCLA could be. Also have other guys like Cade Mays going into the portal and where he might end up, 5-star offensive lineman out of Georgia. We have guys that are announcing declaration to join the NFL draft as early entries. Jake Fromm, DeAndre Swift, Andrew Thomas, CeeDee Lamb, among them. You also got a couple of guys that we expect to be coming out this year, if for no other reason they're just that good. Isaiah Simmons is the modern linebacker. I think that he would have been a 5-star safety had he gone to camps where recruiting evaluators can actually put their hands on him. But sticking with Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow here for a second, we're talking about one quarterback who is undefeated, 25-0 as a starter in Power 5 football, and does not know what it means not to play in the national championship game, and really doesn't know what it means not to win the national championship game. And then we have a guy in Joe Burrow who has tales almost as astonishing and awesome as Ed Orgeron, coming up through AAU, through high school, and now at LSU. One of the things I love most about Joe Burrow is that he's just been a born winner. He finds a way. One of the interesting notes that was found about him over the course of this year was there is a sociology professor that believes that Joe Burrow shares the same traits as first responders when it comes to just being cool under pressure. In a high-pressure situation, Joe Burrow is staying the same, right? His pulse doesn't change, and that's a really big deal in a game of this magnitude. He certainly has not looked anything like scared or rocked throughout this entire year, man. Like, go ahead and take a look at Joe Burrow's games this season. You tell me which one he had a poor performance in, right? We could talk about Kevin Steele and Auburn being able to hold them 23 points, but we don't talk enough about them putting up 500 plus yards of offense against a defense that's led by Derek Brown, who we all expect to be a first-round draft pick coming out this year. We also need to talk about Joe Burrow and what he's got offensively, right? We know that Jamar Chase is the Biletnikoff Award winner, but he only had 2 catches against Oklahoma. The guy that was doing the work was Justin Jefferson. Just 14 catches for 227 yards, 4 tutties. LSU could have scored on every single possession against Oklahoma. They were that good against Oklahoma, and they overwhelmed Oklahoma to a historic point, right? We also got to see Clemson get tested, which is what people wanted to see. And in Trevor Lawrence, we got to see an aspect of his game that we just haven't seen a whole lot of, which is him pulling the ball and running downfield. There's people out there that are going to try to tell me that Sunshine is fast. No, Sunshine just saw the lane and he hit it. Rushed for 107 yards against an Ohio State defense that just doesn't give up that kind of yardage. I mean, going into the Penn State game later last year, they were giving up just a paltry 76 yards rushing per game, right? To give that kind of yardage up to Trevor Lawrence also speaks to Dabo Swinney, Tony Elliott taking what they're given, because Travis Etienne was not able to run for all that many yards, though he did catch a couple of passes that resulted in chunk plays. But Clemson finding a way to beat that Ohio State defense that's loaded up front, that had what I think is the best available player in the NFL draft, best player in the country, and Chase Young on the defensive line. Guys like Baring Browning and Malik Harrison at the second level. Guys like Jordan Fuller in the back end, Jeff Okudah, who was Paycom Jump Thorpe Award finalist, and many people think is going to be a top 10 pick, playing at cornerback. I think he stripped the ball. I thought it was a fumble. I disagree with the referees, but that's part of it. So in between Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, we got a couple of guys that know how to win, but I think we all believe at this particular juncture, Joe Burrow is the better player because we trust him more against the competition he's faced, and I think that's just biased against Clemson. Because I have picked Clemson to win this game, and I picked them on national championship to do it weeks ago on CBS Sports Time to Shine when I got to co-host that show with Evan Washburn. And I still very much believe anybody that's going to pick against Clemson and Trevor Lawrence is doing so at their own peril. Because yes, I understand that you don't believe that Trevor Lawrence is that good. Like at the start of the season, why was everybody ready to say that perhaps he shouldn't even play college football this year and held himself out because he's going to be the first pick in the 2021 NFL draft? Where did that go? Well, because he didn't get off to a fast start, everybody, myself included, were asking, did we overestimate what Trevor Lawrence could do? Since then, he's thrown a bunch of touchdowns and not a whole lot of picks. And it's not just that Clemson is beaten up on a watered-down ACC. It's that nobody had been able to hang with them at all until they faced an Ohio State team that I still believe is one of the best assembled ever in the history of Ohio State football. And that's saying a lot, especially when you take into account not just what they have defensively, but what Justin Fields turned out to be and what J.K. Dobbins turned out to be, right? 2,000-yard rusher. I mean, he went to work on that Clemson defense. But it wasn't like Justin Fields. Did I say Justin Herbert? I meant Justin Fields. It wasn't like Justin Fields wasn't out there passing for over 300 yards and hitting a lot of different receivers and finding them open. And I know that interception goes on his resume to end the game, but Chris Olave broke off the route where Justin Fields thought he was going to go with the football. He released it, and it was too late. I think Justin Fields outplayed Trevor Lawrence in that game, but the scoreboard, to quote Leonard Huff, scoreboard, says Clemson won the football game. And that's after Ohio State jumped out to a 16-0 lead that probably should have been more like 28-0 in the first half, and you're able to put this game away. But that's also the reason why I like Clemson in this game. I like Clemson in this game because they know what it means to have their back against the wall and to have to go get a W. What we've seen from LSU is that they've been able to just get out in front of people and beat them down, right? We could talk about how much they seem to struggle just a little bit scoring against Auburn and how Alabama turned it into a football game late, but it wasn't like these games were in doubt. specifically this game against Oklahoma. We'd all thought for a very long time that the class of college football was 3 teams. We had really deep discussions about which one of those 3 teams should be the number 1 team in the country. And then there are people that were saying before Oklahoma versus LSU that game was going to very much come down to be the national championship. The de facto national championship was going to be held between those 2 teams. Now, we're not so certain. Let's talk about why we're not so certain. Now, we are not so certain anymore because of what LSU did to Oklahoma, right? LSU fans are crowing, and they should be, because Jamar Chase and Pat Queen said exactly what they were going to do to Oklahoma, talking mad trash, and then went and did exactly that. Like Jamar Chase was saying, I want them to put their hands on me. I'm going to show them what happens if you put your hands on me. Now, he didn't have a whole lot to say about that because Justin Jefferson doing the cooking and Justin Broyle serving him up, but the point was made. Pat Queen got home to Jalen Hurts. They forced him to throw an interception. He did not play a great football game. Lincoln Riley looked out-coached, right? That was the other part about this that was just flat shocking. He looked like he got beat by Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda knew what they were trying to do. And then when I was saying, yo, man, you're playing man against this team, maybe Jalen Hurts should be doing that running thing that we all were like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do so much of. Well, they wanted him to go up with the football. And then by the time they figured out that the quarterback run game was going to actually help them, it was too late. You know, we're talking about a game that was over, 49-14 at the half. My goodness. It was ridiculous. 692 yards of offense in a semifinal game. And people are taking that and going, LSU gets to play this game at home, RJ. They get to play this game in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome where the Saints play. And they're the only team left in Louisiana still playing football after the Saints controversially lost a game where Kyle Rudolph got away with a push-off. And yes, Kirk Cousins put the ball where it's supposed to go, but Drew Brees also looked washed. But that's also something else entirely. Yes, Drew Brees looked washed. He threw a duck in the air. There's a reason why you bring Taysom Hill in that game to throw a 50-yard touchdown pass because Drew Brees couldn't do it. Now, we know that LSU's getting the home game. We know that Clemson is going to be considered a dog by some, but that's why they play the games. I expect this to be a raucous LSU crowd. But I also am very interested to see how this chess match goes on between Brent Venables and the combination of Steve Ensminger and Joe Brady in the booth. Because what Georgia tried to do against Joe Burrow, I think can work. You just got to be able to score with them, right? So when Joe Burrow would check to the sideline, Georgia would try to give him a different look. And they're trying to give him a different look, try to throw him off his game. Didn't really work well because they weren't able to get home. They weren't able to get their hands on him and put him on the ground. And they were seeing wide receivers running freakishly open, right? Because I say that pass rush and pass coverage are dependent upon each other. But pass rush really has a say in what pass coverage does. Not necessarily the same. The longer you have to run around and cover somebody, the more likely they are to get open. So you're going to have to be able to beat that LSU offensive line and get home. Xavier Thomas is going to have a game. When you bring Isaiah Simmons on a blitz, he's going to have to get home. He's going to have to force Joe Burrow to make a mistake, something Georgia just wasn't able to do. And that doesn't bode well for Clemson because Georgia was one of the best friggin' defenses playing college football this year. Now, on the other hand, I think Clemson can score with LSU in the way that Ohio State could score, in the way that Ohio State could score with Clemson. I get it. You don't have to think that that's the case, but I look at T. Higgins, he's healthy. I look at Travis Etienne, he's healthy. Lynn J. Dixon doesn't get a lot of pub, but he absolutely can help them. And Trevor Lawrence can hit those guys when they're open. Where it's going to be one for Clemson, though, is defensively. And at this point, who's going to bet against Brent Venables? Right? Because it's not like Clemson has been just this offensive juggernaut putting up all this yardage and breaking all these records the way that LSU has. We're talking about going into the game against Oklahoma. They were the number one offense in the conference, putting up 554.4 yards of offense a game. Oklahoma at the time was putting up 554.2. And every OU fan will tell you, you need a good defense to win a championship. And Clemson has one of the best defenses. And their offense is good enough. Now, I also find it interesting what they're going to do with Isaiah Simmons, because Justin Jefferson is going to go from picking on a strong safety that was the backup to the starting strong safety at Oklahoma and Justin Broyles to going up against perhaps the best defender in the second or third level in the country in Isaiah Simmons, the Butkus Award winner. And I think that Clemson secondary is going to have a much better chance of putting the shackles on a Jamar Chase, a Justin Jefferson, or a Terrace Marshall. Terrace Marshall also running free and open. However, I think what you're going to be able to exploit if you are Clemson, excuse me, not if you're Clemson, what you're going to be able to exploit if you're LSU is Thaddeus Moss going up against Clemson. All right, Thaddeus Moss against Isaiah Simmons. I like that. First, any progeny of Randy Moss probably can catch the ball better than some others just on sheer talent. But then you take into account Thaddeus Moss is a tight end. He's a big body. He knows how to move in space. They use him as an up back. They use him as a fullback. They are able to see whether or not you're in man or zone by just moving him around. Joe Burrow is going to get a better look. So it's not even that the ball is going to have to go to Thaddeus Moss. It's that you're going to have to respect the hell out of him every time he lines up in a 2-point stance or in a 3-point stance. And if you get him into third and long situations, that's a guy that I would still look for. I wouldn't expect this LSU offense to just try to take the top off of Clemson. I think that's going to take a little bit too long to develop, and they're going to be able to get home. I think we're going to see Joe Burrow get sacked 3 or 4 times in this. Matter of fact, that's a prediction, right? I think that Joe Burrow is going to get sacked at least 3 times in this game. And those 3 times could be pivotal, right? If they're on third down situations where they're in field goal range and you're able to knock them out of field goal range, that's a win for Clemson in a big way. We also seen Clemson just not give up any red zone touchdowns like that, man. They're able to hold people down. I also think that you're really going to have to watch Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They pull the wool over Oklahoma's eyes and over all of our eyes, quite honestly, when they said things like, hey, we don't know if he's going to play. He hasn't practiced. We'll see what it means on game day. Clyde Edwards-Helaire came out there, I thought, as a decoy where Justin Burrows came down and you get a touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson. But then he went to work and trucked Justin Broyles. Like, Justin Broyles just had a bad game in this, right? And then we saw Brendan Radley-Hiles, the starting nickel safety for Oklahoma, get knocked out of this, not knocked out of this game. He picked up a targeting penalty, and that got him ejected from this game against Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? Clyde Edwards-Helaire is my size plus about 50 pounds, but he's quick. He's one of their best pass catchers. He had 50 receptions out of the backfield going into the game against Oklahoma. Nearly 1,300 yards rushing. He's a big part of the offense. You're going to have to slow him down. And if Isaiah Simmons is the guy matching up on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, again, you're talking about Thad Moss up against a safety or even another linebacker, and you like that. This is why you like that. You like that! Vikings, they're going to get beat down by the 49ers. Just what it is. However, I do like that. I like Thad Moss up against any safety, any linebacker in the country. I think he can even just move Isaiah Simmons out of the box for you. And if he can move Isaiah Simmons out of the box for you and not let him be, say, a roving third safety out there, you stand a very good chance of beating this Clemson football team. We're going to do this thing where we overestimate what the crowd is going to influence in this game. I think it's a big deal with Oklahoma having to travel to Atlanta where they play the SEC championship. I got a note from Vivid Seats that told me that they expected 70% of the stands to be LSU fans, and they were correct. I would expect that number to get closer to 85 for this game because there just aren't that many Clemson fans. The original Death Valley Tigers just don't travel like that. Now, games that are being played in South Carolina, yeah, but this game ain't being played in South Carolina. It's being played in Louisiana, and they're going to be raucous about it. I just don't think it's going to rattle Clemson. I think they're going to be able to do their silent counts. I think they're going to be able to move the ball effectively. And I think the defense has an opportunity to take all the air out of the Superdome by getting a couple stops early. If you're able to stop Joe Burrow from scoring on the first 2 drives of the game, Clemson wins it. Matter of fact, that's a prediction. Clemson gets 2 stops to start the game. They will win the national championship. And they might win it by 2 touchdowns, right? Because I still believe that having Trevor Lawrence gives you an edge because that dude hasn't lost, right? I think he's like 77-2 going back to high school. It's something ridiculous. I also think that T. Higgins gives you an edge because him up against Derek Stingley Jr., you're going to see how that goes. T. Higgins is going to be a first-round draft pick. He might slide to 12 thereabouts, and the Raiders might take him, but I like him matched up against the true freshman if they can get it. I'm going to be curious to see if they follow guys around in this game because Justin Ross against Christian Fulton is also something you would test. The adage is a wide receiver should beat a cornerback 7 out of 10 times. If that cornerback can beat that wide receiver 5 out of 10, he's an All-American. As a matter of fact, we saw this play out in the NFL. Clemson versus LSU with DeAndre Hopkins versus Tre'Davious White. And in that matchup, it looked like Tre'Davious White was doing a great job in the first half, but what did we see? We saw DeAndre Hopkins end up with like 7 for 70. And at some point, that's what's going to happen. At some point, the all-pro wide receiver is going to beat into submission the all-pro cornerback, because offensive football, it has that much of an advantage. I know where I'm going. You don't know where I'm going. The rules are stacked against you. And I think T. Higgins and Justin Ross are good enough to exploit that. Now, the last bit of this that I want to touch on before we just put this one away for just a little bit is the college football playoff national championship game has a lot of meaning to a lot of people. First, let me correct something I had said earlier. There have been 2 Heisman Trophy winners in LSU history, none in Clemson history. I had that. Billy Cannon won it back in like 1958, and then, yes, Joe Burrow won it this year. I'm not prepared to pick a Heisman winner to win a national championship game. I think it's asinine. I think it's stupid. However, I am going to continue to pick Clemson, but the way that LSU was able to get here, the way that LSU was able to run roughshod over the best conference in college football speaks volumes about what it would mean if they beat Clemson. If LSU beat Clemson, they would go down in history as one of the best college football teams of all time. And we've been able to say that back-to-back years because of the way that Clemson was able to run over people, particularly Notre Dame and Alabama, to finish this game, or finish this season last year. But with LSU being able to knock off Auburn, Florida, friggin' Georgia, right? Alabama, Oklahoma, and if they get a Clemson team that has won 29 in a row, you have to begin to talk about them as one of the best of all time, and you have to give it up to Ed Orgeron and how he has reinvented himself, and he is of Louisiana, and he is of that space. So much so he played football, went to at Northern Western State, right? He's I love that. You have to talk about them in that way, and they deserve everything they get. I'm excited about this game. I really love both of these teams. I hate picking against them, even as I pick Clemson, because they've been against the spread machines all year long. But either way, one of these 2 teams is going to go down in history as one of the best to do it ever, and I'm excited about that. All right. Now, Dabo, go ahead, do your thing. I'm sure Ed Orgeron's going to give us a good Go Tigers at the end of a game if he wins it, but man, I'm here for it. All right. Deuces.